How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by an athlete and a coach who has competed in strongman, powerlifting, and bodybuilding. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Brittany Diamond. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm reporting. I'm talking out of Vegas here. Been a couple moves, so you're hard to keep track where I am. But yes, I'm in Las Vegas, about 102 today, and just working from the AC indoors.
Oh, cool. I thought we were doing like a news presenting there, and I felt like reporting from live in Vegas.
I do some reporting stuff sometimes as that comes out, but yeah, just ignore me. Just ignore me. My brain's half there.
So obviously you mentioned, or we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, obviously a lot going on in terms of moving and all those sorts of things. But how are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
I'm good. Yes. So my world has been kind of like a hurricane. I've moved cross country twice in 4 months. So enough. I'm a very planned type A organized individual. So this has been completely out of my comfort zone, but I'm making it happen. So, and if anything, it's been good in terms of one thing I strive for in business is to show athletes, people that like they can do whatever they want if they believe in it. So this has been putting everything to the test mentally.
Yeah. And how has that been? Because I know obviously you've still been putting content in terms of training and that sort of stuff. But how has your training been going with everything being going on? Because I know one of the things is obviously from a coach's point of view, you try and put things in place to make sure that people are still consistent with the training. Has that been challenging, or have you still been able to stay consistent, or have you just had to adapt a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely had to adapt. I've put kind of like training goals on the back burner just because there's been so much change. Like the first move, it wasn't like I had 1 week to move and I feel like I lost kind of everything. So there's a bit of a mourning process. So I didn't have my dog. I lost, family, community. I feel like I was just kind of out on my own, completely like no support. So training, I was using it kind of like as a band-aid to try and mentally feel better. And then some like injuries kept popping up because I think I was trying to train too hard. And I think a lot of people listening that love strength can relate because that's our outlet. Like that's what we love. And there is, I don't know, maybe I am getting a little bit older and wiser, but I just can't push, 180% when so many outside factors are moving so fast. So training hasn't been great, but I still surprise myself with like less is more actually. So
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to that, especially, as you're saying, getting older and, more experience, you kind of think, it was funny, we were moving some kit around in the gym the other day as it was getting set up. And sometimes when your back just feels tired, and I was like,
oh yeah.
should I really go and deadlift today, or do you think it would be a little bit of recovery? So yeah, I think sometimes it's just having that balancing act, because sometimes, like what you mentioned there, you can start picking up niggles or injuries, or actually feel more frustrated rather than having the actual benefits of training in terms of being able to progress.
Yeah.
Obviously, I did a little bit of a brief introduction there, just the tip of the iceberg, if you like. But for everyone listening who might not know your background in training, in coaching, how you got involved in sort of strength sport, if you like, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, so I have been lifting since seventh grade. I was always a serious athlete, started with track, and then I ended up rowing Division 1 just to be able to get a scholarship. But it was at URI when I was in the women's rowing team that I fell in love with the process of strength and strength training and all of that. And I stumbled upon, I was a junior in college, so I don't know, like 19 or 20. And I was interning at a gym that summer and coaching youth athletes. And I stumbled upon something called Boston's Strongest. And the rest was history. Like I joined, I did a competition in 2 weeks, the novice class, and I fell in love with strongman. Specifically, I fell in love with everything about it, the people, the events, just everything. And I went all in on it. And then when I graduated college, I did my first open show, made it to nationals really quick, made it to the Arnold within a year. And then I got my pro card in 2017. And then I did 4 pro shows in a row. And I kept getting third. That's my best placing, like, which I'm very hard on myself. But now I can kind of look back and say, like, that was really cool. Like, I was third in the whole world. And I know I put everything into it. And then due to injuries, I had wrist reconstruction surgeries and back problems. I switched over and I did a powerlifting meet because I was afraid to bench after I had wrist reconstruction surgery. So I did that. Didn't really like powerlifting. Again, I still respect, I love the process of strength. I love squatting, deadlifting, and benching, but it wasn't the same. Like strongman to me, it was just kind of like all out brute strength. And I was the little kid that used to lift, still do actually, like odd objects like out in the woods. And that's what strongman is to me, like the heart and soul of it. I love. And then I dabbled with bodybuilding just because I thought it would be a really good challenge. And I had built so much muscle, which I liked. And I had a goal to turn pro because in women's physique, I did pretty well. I made it to nationals my first show. But it was kind of eye-opening, the process of it. And now I'm at the point where like I do this because I love it and I really do want to be healthy. And no sport at the highest level is healthy.
Yeah.
And one of my personal goals is I want to be able to be 60 years old and still lift a log. You know, I'm past the ego point. I don't really care about winning and that stuff anymore. I'm on the other side where I care more about, I want to see others that I coach and just others in general have that same passion and have it open other doors like it has for me. So I'm content with being on the other side. You know, it took a while to kind of accept that. And I still battle with it. Like, well, I'm supposed to be an athlete. Like that's my identity. But, you know, things change, people get older. So I'm in that process right now, trying to figure out, like, it's okay to not be an athlete. Like I'm always going to be strong to myself, but I don't need to be doing a competition every single other month.
Yeah, definitely. And how did that gravitate into coaching? You know, from the you know the strongman and the other sports that you've that you've dabbled in as well. How did that gravitate into coaching? And the other question that I like to ask is, who were kind of your biggest influences on sort of your training or your philosophies, if you like, around training?
Absolutely, great question. So I've always had like a coaching role, especially like in high school. I was captain pretty young, and then I worked at the YMCA when I was like 14. And I just kind of naturally always like to help others and show them like how to lift right and how to eat correctly and just hear about different, you know, it's so much more than just teaching someone to lift and eat right. It's about their why and their journey. So I coached, like I said, I was an intern my junior year, and I always like taught classes on the side or coached in some capacity. And then it was 2016, I believe, I started, like, Instagram started getting popular and I started offering a little bit of coaching. And I was, at the time, I was employed full time in medical sales, but I was traveling a lot. So I was going to different gyms to get my own workouts in when I was in prep, and I was meeting other people and they would, you know, ask me about programming and stuff. So I started helping. And then lo and behold, it turned into, you know, a full-time job, which is still crazy to me. And now that I've moved so much, I definitely, like, I love helping people, but I miss in person is kind of my favorite. Like online's great, but there's a lot of moving parts there, especially because I feel, you know, I do both strongman competitors and lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I look at it like it is a big responsibility. Like your life is in someone's hand. And I don't think enough coaches in the industry take that into consideration. My mentor has been Josh Bryant of Jailhouse Strong. He's located down in Texas. I love his methodologies and philosophies. Are you familiar with them, Steve?
Yeah, I've heard, yeah.
So his philosophy is similar to mine, which I come from an endurance background, so I applied that to different strength concepts. And with strongman, you need to be athletic. And I was athletic. And Josh also does a lot of like military tactical type training. It's called like no frills training essentially, and that's what I believe in. Like I think especially we've kind of have lost that. It's a pillar to me, and we've kind of lost that with the world of social media, because now it's like all these fancy gimmicks more or less, when it's like you really don't need much. It's just honest to God, like hard work, brute strength, like use what you have. Like you don't need the fanciest equipment, you don't need kilo plates. Like oh damn it, you can go outside and lift some weird objects and get a workout in, do some burpees. Like so that's my philosophy. I look up to him, I still talk to him, he's coached me before, and now we're just professional friends. I've written some articles for him and some of his books and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I fully buy into that, because I think, and why I was nodding and sort of smiling is, I think, you know, especially during the people will probably be sick of me saying about COVID and lockdowns, but during lockdown, I always use the example of I was prepping for a powerlifting competition. I think I was about 3 or 4 weeks out. Then obviously the world went into lockdown, and it was kind of like I lent a lot of equipment out to members and clients. Then I was thinking, oh well, I need some kit to train with as well. So I ended up taking 2 heavy kettlebells, a strongman log, and I was thinking, well, what else do I need? Whereas actually there's a lot of things you can do. And then with the clients that I was still coaching during lockdown, like I had people pushing cars instead of sled pushes. I had people, you know, carrying their dogs, carrying their girlfriends or boyfriends or partners. And it's
That's fun, yeah.
yeah, exactly. You know, it becomes a lot more fun, and you can still get strong rather than in sort of like the convention. I know obviously, you know, squat, bench, deadlift and all those exercises, they have a place, whereas you kind of hit the nail on the head. You still have to work hard. You could have the most fanciest, best exercise in the world, but if you don't put the effort in, it isn't going to you're not going to get the rewards from it. One thing that just going back to what you were touching on in terms of you know, coming full circle, if you like, and gravitating more from realizing that, you know, training for health, that you're still going to be strong. From, you know, a lot of people gravitate to an identity of I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a strongman, I'm a powerlifter. Whereas obviously, you know, through one reason or another, trying out different strength sports, do you think that's just a natural cycle that people, or a journey that people should go through to experience these different strength sports? And do you think it can sometimes be a negative when people just try and say, well, I'm a powerlifter, so I can't do anything else apart from powerlifting, whereas just thinking about it as a strength sports as a whole, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Like if someone absolutely loves strongman, powerlifting, or bodybuilding, and that's what they want to do, then they should continue with it. I just had a natural curiosity because I didn't like how every sport was so, it seemed like they were kind of to themselves and didn't want to mix and mingle, I guess, to use that term. And I was like, I looked at it like, okay, well, here's the thing. We all love lifting weights. Clearly, we all love pushing ourselves in some way. But what's the main difference? Like and people confuse powerlifting and strongman. Obviously, they're very different, but powerlifting is 3 lifts and it's more calculated. Like you have a set plan, you should know what you're going to lift. Where strongman, I kind of describe it as like being thrown to the wolves. Something's going to change, you know. That's a definite. Something's going to change. They're not going to have a piece of equipment, and who knows how much it really weighs. And I think there's a different personality type there. And same thing for bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are typically, and that's what appealed to me about it, was I am very regimented, and I like having a schedule, and I like knowing what I'm doing at what time. And that was the appeal for bodybuilding to me. And I also, you know, I heard a bodybuilder say one time, like, oh, a strength athlete could never like eat like we can or deal with being hungry. So I kind of saw that as a challenge, because I was like, I could be hungry. I want to see what that's like. And I still train very hard. Like I didn't I made the mistake of not really changing my training too much. And that's why I decided not to. And I'm not saying it's forever, but like I said, I had this clear vision of wanting to be the world's strongest bodybuilder. I wanted to get that pro card. I even set a date for when I was going to do it. I fully believe I could do it, but it just kind of took away from what I believed in. Yeah. And I believe in strength training and pushing yourself and being healthy. And as a woman, you know, there's a give and take to everything. You suffer a little bit in terms of hormonal health. So I do think it'd be good for people to try different things, but it's also, you know, do it for the right reasons. I kind of just did it as an experiment to see if I liked it. I view it as a very positive thing because I've met amazing people. That's the most important part. And I learned a lot. And you can apply it. I think it's made me a much better coach because now I can apply different training methodologies to different things. Like I would never, you know, coach bodybuilding. Like I would do the programming for something, but I'm not qualified to write a diet or drug protocol for a bodybuilder. And I won't pretend I am, because that's another pet peeve I have about this industry is people just pretending that they're fully capable of coaching when they do not have the credentials or the experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point to touch on because, you know, just because you might have competed in bodybuilding doesn't mean to say, you know, you can just replicate that plan and be like, oh, I've done that now. I'm just going to give that to everybody who ever wants to come and do bodybuilding. You know, there's got to be a sort of the art of coaching, if you like, and having, you know, knowledge and experience in that area because like what you said right at the start, you know, someone's coming to you and it's their life, it's their, you know, their goals and, you know, what they want to achieve. And that's something that you can't just think, just do this and you'll be fine. One thing that you mentioned there, obviously, you know, to get to the top level, you know, that does there's that balance between health and sort of performance. From learning from, you know, bodybuilding, from competing at the top level in strongman, how did that, or throughout your journey in each sort of like strength sport, how did that impact, you know, your mindset? Was there any sort of challenges? Because, you know, a little bit like with bodybuilding, when you said there in terms of the nutrition and the discipline of that, you know, sometimes people are put off by that, whereas sometimes people go all in and it can become sort of addictive is the right word. I'm not really
that's
sure.
a great word.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I just want to understand the question so I answer properly. You're asking like what I learned from all that and how I applied it?
Yeah, and how did sort of your mindset change from, you know, going back to strongman and then changing from there? Did you have to get out of that bodybuilding mindset, or did you just take it as, like what you said, you know, an experiment and something that you learned from?
Okay, great question. So bodybuilding probably caused me the most, I don't want to say issues, but I started to experience, so body dysmorphia is a part of the sport, right? And I went into it, I mainly coach women. And that's always been like, that is my mission statement for my own business, is to showcase what strength can do for your quality of life. And I always was basically, I had the attitude like, fuck the scale. And I helped a lot of other women because I would show what I weigh. And, you know, a number does not define you. Again, I went into bodybuilding like this, I will never have body dysmorphia. I'm educated enough. I can't. And what do you know? That monster bit me in the head because it was the first sport I ever did that right after I stepped off stage, you instantly get worse. Right. And I talked to a lot of other bodybuilders because I couldn't wrap my head around this. I'm like, damn it, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? And they said, like, welcome to bodybuilding. Like, I've talked to the top level athletes, like at the Olympia and stuff, and they don't even like to take their shirt off when they look amazing. You know, it took me a whole year. I competed about a year ago. It took me a whole year to be confident again, be able to wear a sports bra and not feed myself like negative terms like, okay, I'm big. So, you know, it did help me in some regards too, like getting more on point with nutrition.
Yeah.
But it's also very hard when you're such a perfectionist. Yeah. It was hard to like let go and live life a little bit. Like when I started moving and traveling, it's like, okay, like it's okay if I don't have a food scale. Like I went, you know, 25 years of my life without really using one. So you're right, it can become very addicting because you almost feel like you're doing something wrong if you're not constantly measuring. And dieting to me felt like going off a program. Like if you messed up on your diet, it was like messing up on your program. And so I'm very mindful when I'm helping my own clients with diet plans and stuff that like I don't expect 100%. It's okay to sub chicken for tuna or potato for rice. So yeah, so just being a little less rigid has been a learning process and probably harder than anything. So yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned there, because obviously, in terms of probably programming, when people first get involved in training, probably, powerlifting and strongman are probably getting a lot more popular now. I know in Leeds, where I'm based, there's loads of strongman equipment popping up in loads of gyms, which is making the entry point really good. And I think, strength training should be something that should empower people, and make them feel as though it adds benefit to their life. Whereas, sometimes people will know like a bodybuilding program and train muscle parts and think, oh well, I have to train like this. Whereas actually, the education around that is, you can still be strong, you can still, diet down. You don't have to, take it to that next stage of trying to get into a competition. And do you think sometimes, from your experience of working with clients, that's where sometimes people struggle to find the balance, or maybe it isn't quite right for them, and they should use strength training, like what I mentioned, as a tool to empower them rather than make them feel that they're not progressing?
Great question. So I never pressure people to compete. If someone has potential, I might throw it out there, but I want people to come to terms with it on their own. I think it can be great. However, it seems to be kind of a double-edged sword because then, like you said, the addiction cycle, like people don't feel like they can train if they don't have a goal by X date. Myself included, I ran into that. Like I try to tell myself now, like I exercise because I love it. But when you have the date hanging over your head, it adds a little more like oomph to your training. But that's hard to get out of. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap. And, you'll see a lot of women, especially that compete in bodybuilding, you'll see them in their off season gain too much weight and they're like, oh, it's fine because I'm just going to cut down. Like that's a really bad cycle for not only psychologically, but also from a health standpoint, like your poor heart dealing with the weight loss and weight gain. And yeah, and that's something that, like I said, I've been really dealing with it. I just decided 2 months ago that I might not compete ever again. So I'm wrapping my head around that because it's like you kind of feel like you attach that to your self-worth. And like I said earlier in the conversation, like you're so much more than a number or a competition. And that can be hard, especially when it's your business. Like I built my business on people knowing who I was from competing. And I look up to Josh in that sense because Josh, I think he was the youngest person ever. I know he was the youngest person ever to bench 500, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what it was. I think he was like 16 and bench 500. And now he has a family and he doesn't compete. And he's still a very successful coach. Yeah. But it's like an identity issue almost. And I've talked to a lot of people about this because I didn't realize how many, when you're 25 and competing, you don't think like it's ever going to be over. And I'm only 30 now, so I'm still young. I still could push, but I just don't know. It's like something more. Like I feel like I'm more than just an athlete now. So I want to use that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, probably, depending on the level. I know for me, competing in powerlifting, it's kind of like, I've got goals and targets and dates that I want to hit from there. Whereas at some point, especially now, coaching and having more people coming through and competing, it's kind of balancing that time. So for me, it's that thought process of I want to make sure that the quality of service I'm providing, doesn't impact the clients, but then also managing, my own training as well. It's that balancing act. And how have you found that transition from, athlete to coach, and what's the sort of processes that you've gone through? I know obviously you've mentioned there of, thinking that you could push, but having that balance. Is there any sort of, thought process or changes in mindset that you've tried to adapt to?
Yes, I try to now basically set a good example for my clients. Yeah. So when I tell them like, I asked them, like, are you sure you're mentally okay to compete? Because I don't want to push anyone if they're not, like, for example, I had a client that was just dealing with a very big loss. And I could tell, I didn't want to tell her the answer. I could tell that she just wasn't ready to compete because she was dealing with stuff. But she, on the other side, it was like she wanted to use that as a distraction. So I try to do the same thing, because I find myself wanting to compete for the wrong reason sometimes, like just to kind of distract me. And that's not the right reason. So it has helped my mindset in terms of making sure I'm doing it for the right reason. And a lot of that, I think, goes back to ego, because I have those moments where I'm like, well, am I still going to be a good coach and be able to coach? Because I have one girl who is young. She's from Canada, and she has the potential to be the strongest woman in the world.
Right.
Definitely. And I see that in her, and it makes me so excited. And it's so nice for the first time ever to see like a client that is so much stronger than me. And I'm like very excited by that. Like, it means the world to me that I get to coach her and lead her. And again, I want to just make sure I'm a good example. Yeah.
Do you think that on a little bit of a tangent though, because do you think sometimes with that I know obviously as coaches we're there to help the client and help them reach their potential and get to where they want to be, but do you think that, or do you believe in the fact that sometimes the clients can hold you accountable? Because obviously you mentioned there about ego, about leading by example, and that by having clients there and having those check-ins and seeing how they're progressing keeps you accountable to make sure that you don't train with ego, or try and do things that you wouldn't recommend to them, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. No, definitely. It definitely helps in terms of, because coaching is so personal. Like, one-on-one, you build a relationship with someone, so it's like they tell me something and I'll tell them too, like, I get what you're going through. Like, I didn't want to train today either, and I couldn't because my back hurt, but I did this instead. Because they always think, everyone always thinks that their problems are unique and they're alone and they're isolated, but we're all human. We honestly, there's a lot of emotions, but we all feel the same thing. And I think as athletes, or anyone who is the type to follow a program or get a coach, you obviously care about making progress, or you wouldn't invest in yourself like that. So, you have to listen to feedback and just keep an open mind. And if you didn't care, you wouldn't be doing it. I try to tell myself the same thing too. Like, if I didn't care about my clients or my business, like, I wouldn't be pushing when I don't want to. I would just go back to bed.
Yeah, definitely, because he's going to come down to that relationship. And I know especially you could see the excitement that you said about your client from Canada, to see the potential they can get to. And that excites, I know from working with my clients, that excites me to then see, right, well, I want to push on with my training and progress from there. We've touched on quite a lot, obviously, about the training and the coaching side of things. And you've mentioned about the nutrition, and from the nutrition, when competing in bodybuilding. And that's kind of, especially when it comes to strength sports, it's a case of, right, you need to be eating enough, and making sure that we're hitting everything that we need to be hitting. But again, going back to that sort of performance and health balance, it isn't a case of, and I'll use myself as an example, I went up a weight class in powerlifting and just thought I could eat whatever I wanted, whereas actually that just impacted my performance and my physique. I was strong, but I didn't really look strong. I just looked as though I'd put on a couple of kilos. And I just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on has your nutrition been relatively consistent, or again, has there been any challenges with your nutrition, or lessons learned from nutrition competing in different strength sports?
Yes, great question. So my nutrition, I feel like ever since I was little, I've always been so active that I've always eaten more than the average. Like, I remember my parents growing up would be like, call me a human vacuum. They'd be like, wow, you better be careful. Like, you eat so much. And then I would look at what I'm doing. It's like, okay, well, I'm barely sitting still. Like, sitting still doesn't work well for me. And even if I do, it's only for like a day at the most, and I still go crazy. So, but I would say when I was first strength training, I went out to eat a lot more because that's part of the community. Like after you have, you know, if you're training all day, you go out for sushi or something like that. And then with bodybuilding, like after getting to such a low body fat, you start to really crave only healthy food. Like I'm primarily dairy free and I primarily eat the same thing all the time. I'll just have larger quantities of it. Yeah, I really don't eat junk. Occasionally I'll have like black licorice. That's probably the most sugar I ingest, but my foods, mainly my protein is either chicken, tuna, red meat. My carbs are either potatoes, rice, oats, cream of rice, and my vegetables, like I'll do a mix. You know, I usually just do frozen veggies. Also a lot of eggs, fat sources like peanut butter, olive oil, things like that. But I pretty much, yeah, I hate the term clean, but I eat very healthy and I don't feel good. Like when I do eat something else, like I don't feel good.
Yeah.
So that just becomes second nature, which is why I do think like dialing in on your nutrition can help with everything because it just makes you feel better.
Yeah. Because obviously, you know, nutrition has a big impact on the training side of things, you know, and it has a big impact on how we feel. You know, if you eat a load of rubbish, you're gonna, you know, probably end up feeling a little bit rubbish. And one thing that I wanted to touch on, I mentioned it a little bit earlier in terms of, you know, the entry point to get involved in strength training now is relatively low. You know, there's a lot of content out there, you know, especially with strongman. You know, a lot more gyms are getting the equipment in from there, whereas when it comes to the nutrition side of things, people are maybe coming from a background of not training and not thinking that nutrition has an impact on performance. How do you go about kind of making changes to people's nutrition and kind of showing them how important it can be to make them feel good, but also, you know, get them stronger? Because in those early stages, beginners can rattle off loads of PBs, but then obviously to progress, you need to focus on your nutrition. What kind of your thoughts on that?
If I had one wish, it would be to show people, especially females, that eating a lot isn't bad. You know, females tend to try and not eat and then they'll binge. Or even I have some guys that like just aren't hungry, so they will go all day without eating and then, you know, have like a burger or something and then train. And it's like, you know, you have to have that steady stream so that you feel good. And I think there's a lot of information about nutrition out there, but a lot of it is for Gen Pop. So a lot of it will be, you know, fasting, or at the end of the day, people overcomplicate it. Like all that really matters is that you're hitting enough protein so that you can sustain and build muscle if that is what your goal is. And then you just fill the carbs and fat, you know, that's where the fun is. That's where you can manipulate like having more carbs on a hard training day or having more fat if you're not feeling satiated. But people make it so complicated when it's really not. You know, it's really not. And it doesn't matter unless you're stepping on stage. It doesn't matter if you have 3 meals a day or 6 meals a day, however you can get it in. We all have different lifestyles and different jobs. It's just, you know, the one thing I would change is like not just having one meal. You know, you want to be having more of a steady stream, whatever that looks like for you. So I think just a lot of times it's just helping people break those barriers of like, oh my God, I'm eating so much or so many carbs. You know, it can be a scary thing in this whole diet culture, I guess, that we have, especially in America. It's pretty bad. So
yeah, definitely. I love the fact that you said, you know, it doesn't have to be really hard. You know, keep it simple. You know, because there is quite a lot of information out there, and I think sometimes because maybe from and obviously we spoke about you know, bodybuilding in terms of the competition side of things, but even sort of, you know, elite level powerlifters, strongmen and women. Do you think that rather than keeping it simple, when people are looking at strength sports, like, oh well, so and so eats this, so this is what I must be doing, rather than, you know, thinking about, right, what are the big rocks that they need to focus on?
yeah, I think a lot of people will compare and try to do things. And again, you don't know what's real and what's not, especially if it's on social media.
Yeah.
So it's important not to, like, every few months I try and do like a day in the life of what I eat, and people are like, you really eat that much? And I'm like, yes, but that might not be for you, because I'm also on an off day, like walking my dog. And I also have a lot of muscle that is going to require me to eat more. So I think when you're starting off, it is good to try and find, like, if you want to get serious with nutrition and training, it is a good investment to find someone that you're a good fit with.
Yeah.
That knows, and there's some trial and error. Like, you need to know what works for you. And it's also your responsibility though too, to make sure that you're telling your coach everything. And like, if you're someone that, like, I have my clients tell me like, okay, how close is your adherence? For example, like 90% on meal plan, missed one meal, went out with friends for, dinner, because you can, you're not doing a service if people are just doing what they want still.
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of plan, in place from there. Yes, you can have, a little bit of flexibility, whereas, it's that consistency of making sure that we're sticking to that plan from there. One thing that you touched on in terms of, because obviously there is that worry of, or people worry that they're going to overeat, whereas actually for the majority of people, I would say that they undereat. And you mentioned there about having protein, and probably, more so in terms of women get involved in strength training. There's sometimes that fear of, oh, I'm just going to put on 10 kilos of muscle straight away if I start eating, or I'm just going to put on loads of weight. And especially when we talk around the mindset of getting stronger, building muscle, and balancing that in terms of having, linear progress rather having these big spikes. What's your approach to kind of, empowering them to realize that, this is actually a good thing? It's not going to be, I'm not going to tell you to eat something that's going to just, have a negative effect on your training or lifestyle.
Yeah, I think just keeping the lines of communication open, and doing a lot of hand holding when women are, actively first starting to get involved with strength training and eating more, because yes, the scale is going to go up. Muscle weighs more than fat. It is a fact. And muscle, it's hard to, people think it's so easy to gain muscle, but it's not the easiest thing. You have to be consistent with it. It's not just going to happen in like a week. And sometimes clients that are just starting out will compare themselves to me, and I'm like, okay, well, I've also been doing this, I have such a solid foundation, and you can get there too, but like, you got to give it a couple years, and people want such a quick fix. And my goal is always to build people's metabolism up to have them eating more. And, because the more muscle you have, like, the more you can get away with, honestly. The more your weight might fluctuate because of water retention and stuff. But like, yeah, that's just a lot of hand holding and communicating for sure.
Do you think that's as well because from, I know we've touched on social media a little bit now, but especially with so much information out there, that they're kind of just misleading, or have what's probably the better way to say it, unrealistic or sort of distorted expectations of what they should be doing, whereas where they're actually at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there's so much information out there. And like I said, it's like any content. Some people lie, put fake pictures, Photoshop, say they're doing one thing and they're not doing another. So it's just a matter of just being careful, I guess, what you're consuming.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's got to be something, rather than having the post, it's just finding about things. What's the actual information about there? Like what you mentioned, how much training have they done in the past? Where are they currently in their journey, if you like. Quite a lot of topics there, that we've spoken about. But what has been sort of, what have you sort of taken from the experiences that you've had to kind of come to where you're at the point now in terms of balancing your training for health and for lifestyle? What sort of the biggest lessons that you've learned from, competing in different sports and, the nutrition and those sides of things?
Yeah, the biggest lesson is consistency triumphs all. It doesn't matter if you have the perfect plan. It doesn't matter if you go off your diet for one day. What really matters is you have to look at it. I look at it in terms of years.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a perfect example. Today is Tuesday. No, today is Wednesday.
Yeah.
So this morning I'm still eating my regular diet where I have carbs at every meal. And I had a thought process this morning, like, oh, maybe I should cut carbs because my back's been bothering me and I haven't trained hard for a couple days. And I actually haven't even trained since Friday, and I did a little workout Monday. And I was starting to be like, okay, I need to do this and do that. It's like, no, Brittany, that's 5 days out of the whole year. And yes, maybe I haven't missed more days lately because of all the moves and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like you don't need a lot to maintain.
Yeah.
You can train less. And I'm starting to learn actually that food is more important because it's such a bad habit to want to resort back to eating less. And it's like, no, you still have that muscle. It doesn't just go away. And it's funny because it's different for myself, right? Like I know that for a fact. I'm well educated on that. I can tell clients that, but when it's yourself, you're still like, oh no, I'm gonna lose muscle. It's like, no, you're not gonna lose muscle in a couple of days. It's not. It takes at least 14 days for it to atrophy, and that's doing nothing.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, especially from maintaining there, because and that's kind of, you mentioned about you could still compete if you really wanted to, and because we've spoken about people wanting to identify as a power lifter or just do that or feel the pressure to compete, when really, there's always going to be competitions there. There's always going to be the strength sports are always going to be there.
Exactly. And that's my goal. Like I always want to be about, like, I could be 16 weeks out from anything, from stepping on stage, from powerlifting, from strongman. So I keep that base. And it's not that hard, I guess. It's hard from a standpoint of like, okay, well, my lifts aren't here or my body doesn't look like this, but it's cool because I'm more balanced, and I guess that makes me more well versed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good thought process to have, because I like the thought process of knowing that you could be 16 weeks out from a competition, because okay, you might not be there yet, but right now, you could know that if you did push, well, I could get my lifts to that point, or I could get my physique to that point, or whatever it may be, which I think sometimes, people realize that maintaining isn't actually necessarily a bad thing.
No, and it was funny because the other day I haven't trained farmers for like years, and I did like, I think it was 265 per hand down and back, like it was nothing. And I was with Nick Best, and he said like, that's more than the weight at the Shaw Classic. And then like I was watching some of the girls, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I still do move faster than them, but I don't feel the need. Like maybe it's just a maturity thing. I don't feel the need to. Am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go nuts.
So the way when I was such a competitive athlete, I used to go out and be like, okay, well, I'm going to kick these bitches' asses. And now it's like, I don't feel the need to do that. I just want to do it for myself and think it's pretty damn cool that I'm still capable of that without trying, really, honestly. So
yeah, cool. I think that's exactly how it should be, in terms of, because I always say that people get involved in training, in competing, whatever strength sport it may be, or sport in general, because they enjoy it. You start doing it for you, and then it does gravitate to, you can dip in and out of the level of seriousness, if you like, in terms of competition, like what you said at the start, especially as you start getting to that elite level. Whereas when you want to push, or doing the farmer's walk, having not done them for a while, I'm sure you enjoyed doing them. And then, to know that it was, above the level of the Shaw Classic, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And, it fills with that confidence.
exactly.
So quite a lot of topics there, a couple of tangents thrown in. The last question that I like to ask, though, from everything that we've chatted about there, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom would be to really, for anyone listening, really figure out, and it's okay if you don't know the answer right now, take some time and really figure out your why, for why you want to do something. Because if you say like, oh, that'd be cool to do a bodybuilding show. But if it's only because you want to look like that, that's not the right answer. Same thing for strength sports. If you want to do it because you just want to be the strongest, not a good answer. Find something bigger than yourself and then run with that.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to finish on, because, you know, there's that thing of what's the motivation, because strength isn't, because you could do, if you just wanted to be the strongest, you could just do a 16-week program and you would get strong, whereas actually what's beyond that, what's the what keeps you going back and doing it, and doesn't sort of make it feel like a chore. It should be something that you enjoy doing. And we've touched on it a couple of times throughout the chat of empowering people, increasing confidence, and ultimately having a positive impact on their lifestyle or health. Thanks a lot, Brittany, for taking the time to jump on. No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Hopefully we meet in person at some point. That's the cool thing about our world, is I'm sure our paths will cross at some point. So
definitely, I've only been to America once. I went to New York and Florida, so I've still got some other parts that I need to tick off. So yeah, that'll be really, really cool. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, see the content that you put out there, or reach out to you, where could people find you?
I'm mainly on Instagram. It's B_Dimes. And I have all my links for websites, how to contact me there.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Brittany, again, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.